Hey traders, Raghee here, and in this recap video I'm going to show you an interesting little trio of markets, maybe three that you never would have thought to really look at, that could tell us a lot about how to gauge, how to have a barometer to the ongoing war of words, war of tweets, however you want to look at it, that's happening between the US and China over, I won't call it a trade war, but how we call it a trade street fight. And the three markets that are actually a really interesting barometer are hogs, feeder cattle, and live cattle. And it's interesting that these three meat markets are kind of at the center of what's happening. So let me show you something here. This is a line from an article that I was reading, and I forgot whose it was, but it's pretty generic information. China's list strikes at the signature U.S. exports. In other words, the list of their tariffs, including beans, beef, cotton, and other key agricultural commodities produced in states from Iowa to Texas that voted for Donald Trump in 2016. So, you know, when you look at how targeted this list is, it's really, you can see the weakness probably most pointedly in the meats. I don't think you see it as much in soybeans or the soybean complex, which is very, very choppy. And you don't really see it in cotton all that much either. That market as well, the CT market, cotton futures, is also very, very choppy. But all the meats, cattle, feeder and live and lean hogs, have been weak, dating back to the latter part of February, early March. Now, here's what's really interesting, and it's the chronology of the headlines and the conversation. The first real major conversation from a major paper or a major source that I remember reading was back on the 12th of March. And, you know, they cite that relations going back the previous week. So this would have been a Monday. So they're actually talking about the week of the 5th through the 9th of March. All right. So the foundations of American relationship with China crumbled last week. So this is Monday, March 12th. And it's an article about what could happen if the trade wars become, you know, a little bit more serious, right? So what I'm looking at is where were the first instances that we really started to see this conversation between the U.S. and China, this trade war conversation, get pretty intense. And you'll notice that it really, not so coincidentally, started a drop in feeder cattle. Now, this may not have been the sole reason. I'm not saying it was the sole reason at all. But when you look at the line in the sand, let's call the 12th or 13th the line in the sand on a lot of these narratives. Remember, we didn't see the tariffs right away. So if I go over to lean hogs here, what happened? There we go. Lean hogs. I don't know why suddenly it's not pulling up, but you know, when you look at the lean hog story, even going back to that same period of time, look at when it started to plunge. So what I'm thinking here is, if this narrative is going to ease up, it's going to ease up as the market, well, that's so weird. It's going to ease up as the market starts to slowly transition out of the concern. And, you know, I think some of the conversations right now about the trade wars, trade skirmish, are getting a little bit better. Secretary Mnuchin was on CNBC earlier today saying we're not in a trade war. I don't think the market really bought it, literally or figuratively. But if the rhetoric calms down and the hyperbole brings both these countries to the table, ultimately, I think we're going to see something good come of it. That's the plan, right? But until or unless that happens, we're going to see the downtrend in feeder cattle persist. What I want to keep an eye on would be time frames like perhaps the 180 or the 120, maybe the 240 as well, for where this fairly persistent downtrend starts to reverse. Because it's not just about buying meats and playing meats, but when do these markets get a reprieve and start to move to the upside? And I think these are the trade war, the trade skirmish. You know, this is the barometer. So I'm going to keep an eye on feeder cattle. I'm going to keep an eye on live cattle. and I'm going to keep an eye on lean hogs. These three markets could be very interesting to understand how the market is interpreting this trade skirmish / war. I'll see you in the next update.